Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to kind of continue from where I left off for the tips for people who are starting out in digital arts, and this time I thought I would maybe go a bit deeper into what I've learned personally and where I was focusing on after the first year, after I was kind of getting used to the medium and I started to think about more things related to art. The background you see here, the speedpaint, is a contest entry. That's World of Warcraft fan art that I was really happy to make. It had been a while since I did like a classic, fantasy forest kind of a painting, and I'm actually kind of happy with the way it turned out. I think I may have overdone the colors a bit, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with the results. So let's get started with the list. The first thing that came to my mind is that after a year you've probably kind of started to figure out your style and the kind of arts that you want to do. If you want your digital art to be more like drawings or paintings or stylized or realistic, you probably had an inclination for one of those, styles anyway. But I think after a year you probably know what you enjoy doing, and I think you should always follow what you like to do. I don't think there's any point in forcing yourself to do realism if you don't like realism, for example. I mean, other than for studies, of course, you need to study them. Anyway, I had found some artists that I really liked and whose styles I would try to emulate. And I think it would be good for your overall learning curve if you focus on one thing at a time. So if you try to master everything at once, it's probably not gonna work. So what I found useful for myself was to focus on a specific kind of style, which is like realistic painting style, and just trying to get better at that first. I've been thinking about like trying out anime and stuff as well, but for now I'm probably gonna stick to it still. And you don't want to get stuck either. You definitely want to make sure that you're not just set in stone and that you can still, try and have fun with other styles as well. But I would try to stick to something at first and then branch out a bit after you're more familiar with this particular style. And I think people usually have a tendency to stick to what they enjoy doing. To be fair, I don't think most people enjoy jumping around after they've found what they enjoy and found the artists whose style they enjoy. Although I will say you shouldn't have to worry about a style specifically. You don't have to have your own original characters or your own original stylized way of drawing things. Because whenever you do something, whenever you create something, you will leave your own mark to it. So I wouldn't worry about that either. So the number 2 on this list is getting a good schedule and understanding your progress, how fast you're progressing and at which level you are, kind of. Because after a year you've probably gotten an idea of how fast you can learn, how long it takes for you to finish pieces. And if you have a normal week schedule, you've probably noticed how many hours a day you can put into drawing, or a week, depends. And whether or not that is suitable for you, or whether or not you should be doing more. You can be more reasonable with your expectations, and you can know how long it's gonna take you to finish a piece, how fast you're gonna learn new things, if you need to study for weeks or days. And this is good if you're interested in doing commissions, so that you can know how long it takes to finish a commission. It's also extremely valuable when you want to speed up your progress. Because if you've been drawing 2 hours a day for a year, you will know that you'll be progressing faster if you just do it like 4 hours a day, which is something that I would recommend you do, because it's good. In general, I would say if you're serious about drawing, you should definitely have a schedule. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but more like a goal, like how many hours a day you want to draw, and you have to stick to it, really. It doesn't, some people are okay with just drawing whenever they can, and some people need to really sit down and focus, and, it depends on you, and you probably know yourself well enough. For me, I'm probably, I'm able to concentrate whenever I want to, basically. And I think with drawing, you usually have to take breaks sometimes. Kind of depends. But I would say it would be good to always sit down for at least an hour, if you can. So the third thing that I would say is in digital drawing, specifically. I think when you're starting out, it doesn't really matter what brushes you use, but after a while you probably start to want to explore a bit, because brushes can make a surprisingly big difference in the results, especially when you're painting textures. I found out that I really need to figure out the brushes that I want to use, because even though obviously you can learn how to draw different textures, you're still kind of stuck with the brush, which is more like a stamp instead of an organic paintbrush. So you'll definitely want to look into brushes that you like using. I think if you have any favorite artists, they might tell which brush sets they use, or they make their own, and sometimes you can get them like for free, sometimes you can get them through their Patreon. I have I think 3 brush sets from artists that I like, and you don't usually use most of these brushes. You usually use maybe 5. I would say that if you have one soft round one with a hard edge, and one with rough texture, you probably are going to be happy with those 3. But it's, having some effect brushes is good sometimes, and if your computer is strong enough to be able to handle these paint brushes which mix the paints, that's really good. That's also something that I would definitely recommend. For a very long time I was not able to do that, so I'm not really used to it, but I think I will at some point start using those kind of brushes as well. But they did not work on my computer, so it would just slow down Photoshop, and it was not worth it. You can also consider drawing with like vectors. I think that's an interesting way to draw. I've never done that before, but I think it would be useful if you want to learn to block your characters and to, learn better shading, for example. The only brush that I would not recommend using alone is the soft edged round brush, because it usually doesn't create a very good texture, and it's good for specific parts like drawing skin, for example. But if you're going to create an entire image with a soft brush, the end result will probably look very messy. And I make this mistake when I was just starting out. But I would say that, one of the things that really changed the way that I painted was when I started to use really rough brushes, because they sort of inspire you to paint differently as well with the shapes that they create, even without your conscious effort. So the fourth thing that I want to mention is knowing how and when to use reference. Using reference is, like I said in the previous video, is something that you probably need to do. It's very essential. But I would say people often forget that you can use reference in so many ways. We usually just think about them. You have a picture of a human and you use their body as a reference or their face as a reference, but there's so much more that you can do than just, learning anatomy. One way that I try to use reference a lot is looking at how shadows work, how the pictures look overall, their lights and their shadows. And I try to sort of learn how you can create a balanced looking image from the values themselves without directly copying anyone. You can kind of learn, if you look at other artists' work, what makes them look good, as in where are the darkest parts, where are the lightest parts, and the composition in general. That's like a really subtle way of referencing, but you can definitely use something like that as well. And I'm sure you've heard of these mood boards where people, collect different colors, for example, or scenes or anything like that, moods, and they use that as a general inspiration and reference for their painting. And that's not something I've ever done, but I have thought about it because I hear a lot of these good artists do that. So it's something that probably would work, but I haven't gotten myself to do that yet. So the fifth thing that I want to talk about is, getting out there as an artist. I felt like after the first year I was still learning. I did not really want to try to make a huge deal out of becoming popular, and obviously I'm not very popular still. But that's not something that I even worried about at that point, because in a way I believe that if you are good enough, you are more likely to be found by people. And while it's obviously really important that you get people to recognize you, it's also good to have like quality art that you can show to these people. I'm not really sure if that is the best way to do it, but it's something that I would prefer if that worked. But you definitely want to get, yourself an audience, not only because it feels good or you can get employed or whatever, but because it's good to have feedback. And in general, it would be good if you're also social and you leave comments and criticisms to other people as well, because they can learn from them, and you can learn a lot from criticizing other people's work as well. I haven't really done that in a while, but I used to write more longer feedback for people's artwork, and I found that whenever I was writing about them, I would think to myself, what works and what doesn't, and that's kind of, it helps you yourself in the future as well when you're faced in a similar situation where you don't know what to do. But obviously you have to be careful when you criticize other people, because you don't want to discourage them from making art. But being negative isn't like, it's not something that you shouldn't do. I think you should. If you're really, if you're a professional, you do want to have at least ArtStation. I think that's the most professional platform that there is for popularity among people, not just artists, but people in general. I think Instagram is probably the one right now. I am not, I just joined it a few weeks ago. I found it very overwhelming. But that's something that I see most artists use, and it's probably their main platform. For me, my main platform is DeviantArt, which is good for its community. It's probably not the best for getting employed. Well, it isn't. But it's got a great community, and I found it very easy to find new artists there. Twitter and Tumblr are sites that I also have, but I found it really difficult to be active there because it takes some time to get used to a new platform, and I just kind of don't have any interest in doing that. Especially Tumblr feels a bit there is a community, but if you're not familiar with how Tumblr works, the site seems very confusing at first. So I'm not sure if, you know, it's obviously good to go on every platform, but is it necessary? I don't know, really. Maybe if you're able to be active everywhere, then it's obviously good. Okay, so those were the 5 things that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if this was useful for anyone in any way. It doesn't matter, I'll keep making videos. Oh, and yeah, you know, when you're talking about platforms, you have to remember YouTube. Even if you don't want to do voiceovers, which I understand if people don't want to do that because, you know, you don't always have something important to say. But you can still do speed paints. I would definitely recommend doing that because it is kind of like getting a bigger audience again from people who aren't artists, because there's so much on YouTube. And well, in order to get popular on YouTube, you probably have to be active as well. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. But I'll get back to you when I've learned, okay? Other than that, I think I am done. I appreciate if you stuck around for this long and listened through the whole thing. And I'll have another painting video coming up in a couple of days probably. Depends a bit. So, see ya.